Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 138, and oh, how I've missed you. I'm so happy to be back. I've taken a little break from recording new podcast episodes, and it's been a few weeks, more than a few. And so it just feels so wonderful to be back here, reaching out, connecting with you. I hope you've been really well, and I hope this podcast episode today can help you be even more well. And I know that it will if you take it to heart. So one of the underlying causes of my first marriage's ending was because of what I call care distortion. It really wrecked me, and it led me to feel like my husband didn't care about me enough. And it really took a huge toll on how good my then husband and I felt with each other. So I'm going to tell you all about my story with it today and how it's very possibly affecting your relationship too, as it does with so many highly sensitive women. But before we dive in, I want to share an announcement. While I was not recording podcast episodes for you, I have been working behind the scenes, spending my time coming up with some things that I think you're really going to be excited about. And I'm just going to share the first one right now, which is starting in the early new year as a way to kick off the new year on a great foot. I am hosting an event called Freedom from Hurt Week, and it's for you. It's a virtual live event spread out over 4 days to help you leave any hurt in your relationship in the dust. I'm going to tell you a little bit more at the end of today's show. But for now, if you're curious and you'd like to be free from hurt in your relationship, head over to lifeisworthloving.com/freedom from hurt, and you'll learn all the details about it there. You got to sign up by January 4th or before. So go check it out and get your ticket. And surprise, for those of you who bought the Stop Taking It So Personally course sometime after August 2023, you actually get a free ticket. So there's nothing further you need to do to attend Freedom from Hurt Week. Just keep your eyes out for an email from me with all the details. And by the way, I love doing this. I love giving you even more than you thought you were signing up for. I do it in all my programs. In other words, what you see usually isn't all you get. You usually get more when you work with me. To learn more about Freedom from Hurt Week, you can also just go to the direct link, which I've placed in the show notes. So let's dive in. So one of the challenges that has become so clear to me over all these years of me coaching people, humans, is that having a human brain makes it pretty much impossible to always see completely clearly. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but to put it simply, we always perceive through a web of our own pasts, our beliefs, familial and societal conditioning, and even hormones, right? Those things affect how we perceive deeply. You can think of it as wearing metaphoric glasses that distort how we experience reality based on our own personal history and physiology. Like we're all kind of rotating through a variety of eyeglasses that are either foggy or are like those ones where the prescription is almost right. Like if you're at the eyeglass doctor and you're trying on different prescriptions and like you get one, but it's like not quite right, right? Or where the prescription is totally off. Or sometimes these glasses are more like binoculars that pull some things into like looming focus, but blind you to what's on either side of you, right? You get the idea. We rarely wear the actual perfect prescription glasses, where all is crystal clear in our perception of reality. So you can imagine this can get us into a lot of trouble, especially in intimate relationships. And it does with so many women that I work with. And it certainly did with me in my first marriage. Specifically, when those glasses are distorting how much care we perceive there is towards us, or how much there isn't from our partner's end. So if this doesn't make a ton of sense yet, I promise it will. So lately on calls with clients, I've been hearing a lot of women say how they don't really feel important or valued, or like their partner really cares that much about them. I've been hearing this a lot lately. And my clients tend to have a whole list of evidence to support this claim that their partner really doesn't care enough about them. For example, maybe their partner said they didn't like her new haircut, or that he didn't tell them he appreciates how she did a thoughtful thing for him, or that he doesn't tend to defend her to their teens when their teen is saying something harsh, or that he never tells her she's beautiful, or that he didn't offer to share the leftovers for lunch with her. And because of this or that thing, it means that he doesn't care, or that she's unimportant to him. So I want you to pause for a moment and notice, are there things in your relationship, things your husband does or doesn't do, that make you or lead you to feeling like he doesn't really value you, or that you're not very important to him, or that he doesn't care? If so, you are in good company. It feels so familiar to me because it's exactly what I felt like in my first marriage, really often. So when I hear these types of things from my clients, I feel so much empathy. I really know how painful it can feel. But I also know that it's most often a distortion, an illusion that's causing a huge amount of unnecessary pain for you and for me back then, and for my clients. Because it truly wasn't that my husband didn't care. I just saw through a filter of my own insecurity and my own beliefs about myself and other people, which were wired into me from my early years. But of course, it really felt like he didn't care enough. When he sat quietly with nothing to say, when I shared how I felt lonely and not cared about fully, or how he fell asleep when I was trying to connect with him in the evenings, or I was opening up my heart and being vulnerable with him, and he just like, right? Or how he didn't do those big gestures, or even many small gestures to show his love for me, or how he wasn't romantic often, or how he hardly had anything to say to me in those times we were in different states and we were trying to connect on the telephone. Back in the day, we had landlines. Or how he seemed spaced out with me, like really caught in his head when we were spending time together, instead of being really present with me. And there were so many times sitting at our dinner table together after our young boys were asleep upstairs, where I was talking at him about how I didn't feel cared about enough. And I can still really feel like I'm there if I try, staring at that round kitchen table with that huge hurting hole inside me. That sense of deep hurt that was also kind of covered over by anger. And I can just see him sitting there silently or saying something kind of angry back at me. It's really not a fun memory. And that's the thing about all of this. When we're feeling that hole inside, that hurt of feeling like he doesn't care, right? When we feel unimportant to our partner, what we so often do is get angry at him. The hurt often comes out as anger when we talk to him about how we don't feel he cares a lot, or we feel like we're unimportant to him. Yeah? Does that feel familiar to you? And then I think what so often happens is that he gets defensive, or he gets really closed off, right? This is a classic experience for so many of us in our relationships. And if we slow down and we think about it, your partner gets that way, right? Shuts down or gets really defensive or reactive with you when you're kind of acting out of that place of hurt and anger because you don't feel like he cares about you. He gets that way because, of course, if you were told in a frustrated, angry tone that you weren't being a good partner, which is most likely what he's hearing when you tell him you feel like he doesn't really care about you enough. And if you felt like you did care and you were doing the best you could, and you heard your partner telling you that he feels like you're not being a good partner, you'd probably react defensively too. Yeah? Or feel not seen or valued as well. Yeah? I know that would be true for me. And this is what happens so often. And for me, it definitely did. When I wasn't feeling valued enough by my husband, it led to me kind of blaming and communicating in ways that led to him not feeling valued by me. Like I wasn't seeing all the ways he was showing up and caring for me. Like I didn't care about his caring. Like I didn't value his way of caring about me. When this happens, we have both people then in the relationship not feeling so loved and cared about, even though both people most likely are loved and cared about. And then this just really separates you even more and drives a downward spiral of pain and more division in your relationship. It did for me and my ex for sure, because I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't even know I was in large part responsible for it, that it was something in me driving this. And yes, of course, he played a part of it too, in that he was not the epitome of a doting, super affectionate hubby or a skilled connector. But of course, I was responsible for a huge part of it. And unfortunately, because I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone else, I do see this same sort of dynamic playing out in so many of the relationships of the highly sensitive women that I work with. And when I see this, what I now know is that there is an element of taking things personally for them, for my clients. Things that are not actually personal. Of course, that was true for me back in the day. Deep down, we worry it's something about us, how he feels specifically about us that has our partner not being affectionate or really present or really considerate or offering us those leftovers, right? So this is an element of taking things personally that I call care distortion, which is the inaccurate perception that he doesn't care about you enough because he isn't showing you his care in the way you best receive it, like maybe complimenting you or thanking you or being more romantic or being more empathetic, etc. And of course, so much of this hurt and the resulting dynamic that I just kind of explained a few minutes ago is simply because of care distortion, which is really like having those "he doesn't care about me" glasses on. But remember, those glasses are not clear seeing glasses. They're distorted, they're foggy, they're warped, so you can't see clearly. So I want to talk about this in more sort of scientific terms, because I know that metaphors can be really helpful, but sometimes it's nice to hear like, well, what's actually going on there that we seem to be seeing so unclearly, so distortedly. So I want you to recall, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, there's this thing called the confirmation bias of the brain. It's just one of the ways our human brain works. And it operates like this. If we had an experience or multiple experiences of not being entirely delighted in or adored as younger people, as children or in our younger relationships, for example, what happens is we start to believe we are not care-aboutable enough, or that others don't care enough about us. And that becomes a core unconscious belief. But then we go about our lives and our relationships as if we have these "they don't care about me enough" glasses on. Glasses that focus on where people are not loving or caring about you. Glasses that blind you to where and how much they do care. Because the confirmation bias basically just means when we have a belief, we see evidence of that belief everywhere, even if the belief is not true, if it's not a factual thing. And we miss evidence to the contrary, or anything that is in opposition to the belief. So again, if I believe people don't care about me, that's what I'm going to notice in my intimate partner, where and how he isn't caring about me. So I want to take a little side journey here and talk about where this often comes from in HSPs and in the relationships that we have, and why I think I see so much of it in my work with women. And then we'll get back to what care distortion really is and what helped me get out of it and start to inch by inch feel more cared about in my marriage, so you can also experience the same. So I think this belief about not being cared about enough is a little bit more common with HSPs than non-sensitive people, because as babies, we are, because we're sensitive, more sensitive to a lack of full attunement. Or maybe we actually do get lack of that or less of that attunement as babies, which is the time we are wiring in an often lifelong sense of whether we are lovable and delightful and care-aboutable or not. Really, we're wiring that in to ourselves throughout childhood and into young adulthood until our brains are fully formed. But the bulk of it starts to happen in those very early years before age 3. And it's oftentimes in those early years that, our parents or caregivers are overwhelmed. They have a lot of things they're attending to. And even if they are the most loving parents, it doesn't mean they're always fully present or able to attune to us as much as our systems require to feel this, to get this wired in sense of, I am so care-aboutable. I am so loved. People love and care about me. So if we aren't shown that, if we aren't delighted in very consistently and attuned to super consistently, then we also don't see easily later in life that we are so cared about, even when we are. So I tend to see a lot of people whose attachment style is more anxious in my practice, in my work. But truly, this can lead to an avoidant style attachment as well. Basically, not being attuned enough to in the early years, or having some rough sort of semi-traumatic or traumatic experiences in like young romantic relationships can lead to us having an insecure attachment style, which again is that anxious or that avoidant. Now, there's research by Dr. Elaine Aron, who is the sort of godmother of highly sensitive people. She coined that term. Her research suggests that HSPs, especially those who experience unhealthy or, again, inconsistent caregiver relationships in childhood, will be somewhat more likely to develop this insecure and often anxious attachment than non-HSPs. And it's because of what I talk about as the plummet effect. If you're interested in hearing more about the boost effect of HSPs and the plummet effect, there's a very recent episode on that. So check that out. That's pretty fascinating information to know about yourself. But again, to repeat myself, this experience of sort of not feeling cared about enough by other people also can come from things that happen in early romantic relationships, where we really didn't have the emotional skills or the kind of hardware in our systems to support ourselves, to feeling cared about, even when that like very unskillful teen or young 20s boyfriend or love interest didn't treat us well or didn't have the skills to treat us decently. The good news is that we can change that wiring in us, that patterning in our systems. We can change how cared about we feel, even if our partner keeps doing things as they have been. And my story illustrates this. I'll explain a little bit more of my story in a minute. But the thing is, we can rewire our brains so that we can stop feeling hurt or rejected or unimportant regularly and actually start seeing and feeling the care and the love that is there in most cases, in 99% of cases. So even if our partner, isn't consistently being a highly doting, generous, affectionate, empathetic, ideal model of an intimate partner, we can still feel loved and cared for deeply. Yeah? Doesn't that sound amazing? Because it's not so likely that your partner is going to become that ideal model of an intimate partner. Sorry to break the news to you. He could definitely improve. And I've witnessed that with thousands of relationships, including my own, particularly when we stop feeling so hurt and start valuing the care and love that is there. But becoming that ideal model, unlikely. So this early wiring, these early experiences are so often the source of care distortion. And that bias of our brain to see his actions or lack of actions as a lack of care and a lack of valuing us. So you can see that this makes us take things personally, makes us feel like he's not caring because there's something about us that makes us not quite care aboutable enough, that people don't care about us. So like if your husband is not offering you the leftovers, that would equal he doesn't care about me. And hubby falling asleep while sharing from your heart, that equals he doesn't value me. Or hubby not defending you when one of the kids says something mean-spirited to you equals I'm not important to him. That's what our brain does when it's operating from this insecure attachment place, this taking things personally place, this care distortion thing. And again, to reiterate, what's so weird about this is in most cases, it simply isn't true that your partner doesn't care about you. Weirdly, even back in my first marriage, I knew my husband loved me, but his actions often didn't convey that in an obvious way. And then I felt uncared about. And this is so true for so many of my clients. For example, on a call the other day, one of my clients' partner was actually there for part of the call, and my client was going through some care distortion and feeling unloved. And when I asked her partner, right after we talked about this for a little bit, and I asked her partner if he did care about her, he said a huge resounding yes, of course. Now, were his actions always perfect expressions of this? No, of course not. Mine aren't always either. My actions aren't always perfect expressions of love and care. And likely your actions aren't always perfect expressions of love and care towards your partner either, right? Even though you do care and you do love him, yeah? You might be better at showing and expressing that love and care. I'll give you that. But this is because you're an HSP and you're a woman and you're super oriented around connecting in relationships. You're a connection machine. That's just innate to being an HSP and a woman. And he's likely not so much of a connection machine. And this does not mean he doesn't care or value or adore you. So if it's not that he doesn't love you or care, where does the pain and hurt that you feel come from? Why does it feel like he doesn't care? Well, in addition to these distorting glasses that don't see his care, for me, so much of the pain of it all also came from not knowing how to guide my own emotions, or what I think of as insourcing a sense of love and validation. And this is a skill that is sorely lacking in so many of us by no fault of our own. And if you're curious about learning a little bit more about this, I have an early episode of this podcast called Insourcing Validation instead of outsourcing it. It's episode 34. It's not our fault that we don't know how to feel that care and feel that validation, but it is something we can learn to do, to insource. So if you're feeling hurt and not valued or important to your husband, this is a strong indicator that you have some room to learn these emotional skills too. So along with taking off those care distorting glasses, these skills are a huge part of no longer taking things personally and no longer feeling that aching hurt of not feeling as loved as we want to, and instead feeling important and loved by your spouse again. Now, I have a caveat, which is that there may be very occasionally truth to your partner not caring. But for almost all of you listening, that is not what's actually happening. Instead, if you aren't feeling his care, it's because of all we've talked about, in combination with your partner's own humanness and just unskillfulness. Like he didn't learn how to be skillful in relationship, possibly. Like most people. He wasn't modeled it well. He wasn't taught it. There wasn't like a class offered about how to be a great partner and husband, right? And this is one of the things that's so different in my marriage now. It's not that my husband loves me more. It's that I no longer need him to be a certain way and show it to me all the time or really regularly to know and feel how valued and cared about I am. I no longer look through those distorting glasses, seeing only his imperfect ways of relating to me and taking them as signs of his lack of care. No, I put on a better pair of glasses. So I see so much more clearly now that his ways of relating that are not all lovey-dovey or super kind or super tactful or sweet and caring and empathetic, right? That those ways simply mean he's being a human with his own inner challenges that lead to not always being obviously loving and caring. With my better pair of glasses on, I can see that his lack of offering me those last eggs for breakfast and just eating them himself, which happened this morning, that has nothing to do with how much he cares about me, but rather it's about what's going on in his brain at the moment, which could be, take note, maybe he was just spacing out, or maybe he was just cracking those eggs out of habit, right? Like autopilot with no thought at all. Or maybe he knows I rarely eat eggs for breakfast and unconsciously assumed that I wouldn't want them today, right? It wasn't because he didn't care about me. And you know what? Just like my ex, my husband now also sometimes starts to fall asleep when I'm sharing from the heart. I've told this story before on the podcast. But now, when he falls asleep, instead of getting all upset and angrily saying, "You don't care about me enough to even stay awake," like I used to do with my ex, I just giggle or I make a light joke about it. And we both laugh at his sleepiness and I feel no hurt at all because I no longer have the habit of taking things personally or looking through this care distortion lenses, right? I no longer think about his sleepiness as having anything to do with how much he cares about me or our relationship. I simply see it for what it is. A man who's had a long day working to support his family and who's simply tired. So it makes it easy to just postpone our conversation till he's less tired. And in the meantime, have a laugh together about his capacity to nod off wherever he may be if he's tired enough. No hurt, no anger, no disconnection, no adversity, just connection. So I tell you, taking off those care distorting glasses and developing the other micro emotional skills of not taking my husband's behavior personally has been a complete and total game changer for me and my experience in my marriage and my husband's experience in it too. Because since I very rarely feel that hurt of feeling uncared about, I don't act out in a way that leads to him feeling attacked and unvalued or like he's doing a bad job. Instead, I value his way of valuing me. I care about his unique ways of caring. And so we both feel very cared about. And it's from there that so much fun and ease and even playfulness and affection can really enter into our life together even more. So I want you to know that you too can put an end to this care distortion and that hurt that you tend to feel in your relationship, just like I did. You can even have laughter and closeness instead with your spouse. And I want that so much for you. So I hope that hearing my story about it has been helpful for you and is inspiring you and giving you some hope. And if you want to take it further and make the hurt of taking things personally a thing of the past, you've got to join me in Freedom from Hurt Week. It kicks off early in the new year, but you can start the process right away as soon as today. So think of Freedom from Hurt Week as taking a ride from Painville to Peaceland and even on to Connectionville with me as your tour guide, ready to show you the way and answer all of your questions about ending the hurt in your marriage so you can leave it in the dust for good. And you'll get your free ticket to ride when you get the Stop Taking It So Personally course by January 4th, 2024. Of course, this is going to make an amazing holiday gift to yourself and even to your family and your marriage, your partner. So get all the details about Freedom from Hurt Week over at lifeisworthloving.com/freedomfromhurt or find the direct link in the show notes to this episode. I just can't wait to see so many of you just letting that hurt be gone, be done, and moving into a new era in your relationship where you do feel so much more peace and ease and connection with your partner. All right, my friends, I will see you soon and be oh so well.